If there is one archetype of player that has gone most underappreciated throughout NBA history, it is the defensive stalwart. We basketball fans love tough buckets, we love nasty handles, we love posters, and we claim to know the importance of defense, but rarely give the great defenders adequate shine, especially if they don't have the offensive game to go with it, or if they played long ago. Today, we're going to change that by showing love to the best defender in every NBA team's history. The criteria here is simple. I am judging these players by their peak with that franchise within the context of their time. And this list is based on impact, not accolades, not how you rank among your position. Rim protection is historically the most valuable aspect of defense, so there's a lot of big men here. Then there's some versatile forwards, and it's going to be a lot harder to make it as a small guard, no matter how well you defend one-on-one at your position, because bigger dudes are by and large more impactful team defenders. I sincerely apologize to all the TR Dunn stands for that criteria. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. The Boston Celtics' best defender ever is Bill Russell, who took a defense that was below average the year before he arrived and turned them into the #1 defense in 12 of his 13 seasons, usually by a wide margin. And when he retired, they became a below average defense again. Russell was so dominant defensively that in the 3 seasons Boston ranked last in offensive rating during his career, they still won the title each year because their defense was that much better than everybody else's. We haven't seen anything like that since, and we won't ever again. Russell was a genius defender and the greatest rim deterrent ever, who also probably blocked about 8 shots a game with perfect timing, special agility, great hands, elite post defense, and all-time great rebounding. He is the most impactful and greatest defensive player ever. The Knicks honor goes to Patrick Ewing. We have to shout out Clyde Frazier, one of the best guard defenders ever, and Dave DeBusschere, a sensational defensive forward, but Ewing's elite rim protection made him a bit more impactful in my eyes. The Knicks had excellent defensive personnel in the mid-90s, with Anthony Mason, Charles Oakley, John Starks, Derek Harper, but Ewing was the centerpiece of 3 straight #1 defenses. Ewing was a prolific shot blocker, averaging 2.7 blocks per game over 15 years in New York, had good hands, averaging a steal per game with the Knicks, and had solid agility at his peak, making him an overshadowed elite defender in the most stacked era for defensive bigs. Tyson Chandler also deserves a shout for managing to carry a very lackluster supporting cast to a top 5 defense in 2012, the season he won Defensive Player of the Year, but I still view Ewing as the slightly more dominant interior defender. For the Nets, it's Jason Kidd. New Jersey had the number 23 defense the year before Kidd joined, and he was largely responsible for their transformation to the league's #1 defense for the next 2 seasons. Kidd was massive for a point guard, 6'4" with a 6'8" wingspan, which made him an extremely versatile defender, capable of guarding both athletic guards and big wings very well. He also had excellent hands and a knack for forcing turnovers, very impressive defensive IQ and positioning, and was an elite rebounder for his position, making him perhaps the most impactful defensive guard ever. The Sixers have a few strong candidates. Joel Embiid gets an honorable mention for being one of the best pure rim protectors in the NBA since he debuted, but his slow-footedness does meaningfully limit his transition defense and versatility. Bobby Jones was named the Secretary of Defense for good reason. He was one of the best forward help defenders ever, an extremely high-effort player, and the best defender on numerous elite Sixers defenses in the early 80s when they posted 5 top 5 units in 6 years. Dikembe Mutombo anchored an elite Philly defense that, along with Iverson's volume scoring, was the backbone of their finals run in 2001. Mutombo was moving a little bit slower by this age, but at 7'2" with absurd length, could block and alter shots from just about any angle in an era when games were slow and gritty and rim-protecting centers like him were at the modern peak of their powers. But I'm going with Wilt Chamberlain. It was with the Sixers that Wilt figured out how to maximize his ungodly ability, peaking in terms of offensive efficiency and playmaking and defensive dominance simultaneously. Wilt loved stats and flash, staying closer to the rim to juice his unofficial block and rebound totals, and he wasn't as versatile or smart a defender as Russell, but he did care about defense in his Sixers years, and as by far the biggest, strongest, freakiest athlete in the sport, that made him an all-time great deterrent, which paired with his unmatched rebounding, made him a hugely impactful defender. The Sixers ranked 7th of 9 teams in defensive rating before Wilt joined, and in his first full season there, they ranked 2nd. Then, in 1968, Wilt led the only defense to ever top a Russell Celtics unit as the best in the league. All the while, he's averaging 25 rebounds a game and probably about 8 blocks. Dikembe was an amazing defensive anchor in Philly, but was not as absurd an outlier as Wilt. Fun fact, the Sixers actually had a better defensive rating before trading for Dikembe in 2001, which I bring up just to say, respect his predecessor Theo Ratliff. The Raptors' honor goes to Kawhi Leonard, who was still the best wing defender in basketball for his lone season in Toronto. With a 7'3" wingspan and freakishly large hands, Kawhi could snatch the ball from opposing ball handlers and stay in front of basically any wing. He allowed a comically low 0.56 points per isolation that season, held players 7% below their average field goal percentage in the postseason, and gave fits to Giannis, who couldn't overpower him and was bothered by his length, shooting just 7 of 24 when guarded by Kawhi in the playoffs. This was probably his rebounding peak too, as he grabbed over 9 boards per game in the playoffs. At his peak in San Antonio, Kawhi was at least a top 3 perimeter defender ever, and he wasn't too far off that in the 2019 title run. For the Cavaliers, I'm going with Evan Mobley. I know this is going to upset a lot of people who want to see LeBron here. And towards the end of his first Cavs stint, LeBron was beginning to peak defensively and was an elite, extremely versatile defensive player. But he reached his true defensive apex in Miami, and I'd argue Mobley's current defensive impact surpasses LeBron's best days with the Cavs. Mobley is one of the most switchable bigs in basketball, the rare big man who can truly excel guarding elite wings for extended stretches, as he did versus both Paolo Banchero and Jason Tatum in the playoffs, holding them to 32 and 37% shooting respectively when matched up with them. Mobley can slide his feet with those big wings and force them into tough jumpers, or disrupt their driving attempts with his 7'4" wingspan. At the same time, he's one of the absolute best rim protectors in basketball, having held opposing players 10% below their typical field goal percentage at the rim this regular season and 15% below it in the playoffs. I'd argue he has the best combination of truly elite rim protection and switchability in the NBA today. He's also a good post defender, a very good rebounder, and he excels at the 4 and the 5. And he's playing a more valuable defensive position than LeBron at an extremely high level. The Bucks have many strong candidates. Their steals machine, Alvin Robertson, the first depoy ever, Sidney Moncrief, the best defensive guard of the last decade, Drew Holiday, and Giannis Antetokounmpo, a one-of-one athlete and roaming wrecking ball. But I'm actually going to go with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. For much of Kareem's career, I'd describe him as an above-average defender whose effort and focus came and went, as was acknowledged by the great captain Roger Murdoch.
I think you're the greatest, but my dad says you don't work hard enough on defense.
But young Kareem was an absolute defensive monster. At 7'2", he was a towering rim protector, much more agile than he was in his Lakers years, and more consistently committed to the defensive end. In 1974, the first season steals and blocks were tracked, Kareem averaged a monstrous 4.9 stocks per game. But along with those flashy stats, his impact was monstrous. Kareem led 4 straight top 2 defenses in Milwaukee, and when he left, they quickly plummeted to well below average. I know some people will push for Moncrief here because of the accolades, but as amazing as he was, no guard of his size has ever matched the impact of a dominant defensive big. For me, it's tougher to deny Giannis's off-ball disruption and multifaceted impact, but it's worth noting his Bucks were not a good team defense until they added Brook Lopez, who could serve as a primary rim protector. Kareem, at his best, needed less around him to anchor an elite defense. So peak for peak, within the context of their eras, I give him the slight edge. The Pistons leave us with another dilemma. They have two of the greatest defenders ever in Dennis Rodman and Ben Wallace. This time, I am going with the more versatile defender because he is truly one of one in that regard, and that's Rodman. The Worm was the most versatile on-ball defender in NBA history. He had high-end lateral quickness, could teleport around screens, and apply psychotically intense ball pressure to guards. But centers couldn't bully Rodman either. Rodman was stronger than he looked, had a tremendous understanding of leverage, and exceptional instincts that made him a legitimately awesome post defender. Fans will casually claim that many great defenders can guard 1 through 5, and it's almost always an exaggeration, but if it's ever been true for any player, it was Rodman. He gave fits to everyone from Magic Johnson to Shaquille O'Neal. He was simply a weapon unlike any other in history in his ability to take on so many matchups and throw opposing stars off their game. Although he may not have flashy steal and block numbers, he was also a highly disruptive and active off-ball defender. And Rodman, who had perhaps the greatest motor in league history, could truly put everything into defense because his offense would always be very limited. His job was to fly around, cause havoc on that end, and put his body on the line. And boy, did he deliver. And of course, he's the greatest inch-for-inch rebounder ever, and in my opinion, the best defender ever who was not an elite rim protector. If I were starting a defense from scratch, Rodman would be among my first 5 or 6 picks, and I do prefer his unique all-around impact to Wallace's phenomenal interior defense. We could give Rodman the nod for the Bulls as well. He was still an amazing defender in Chicago, but in his mid-30s at that point, he had naturally lost some athleticism compared to his Detroit years. So I'll give the nod to Scottie Pippen, who is probably the best pure wing defender ever, with Kawhi very close. At 6'8" with a 7'3" wingspan, Pippen was an extremely disruptive defender with excellent hands and suffocating length and athleticism. In his prime, he was an elite vertical athlete, which made him a strong secondary rim protector and rebounder. He also had impressive matchup versatility, capable of checking guards and bigger post players, though not quite at Rodman's level, but he was an extraordinarily complete defender and the centerpiece of one of the great defensive runs in league history. I know some people will mention Michael Jordan here, and although he was certainly a very good defender and one of the great defensive playmakers we've ever seen, Scottie was better on ball, could handle more versatile matchups, was a better interior defender and rebounder, and was more consistently locked in defensively. MJ was more of a gambler. For the Pacers, it's Meta Sandiford Artest, at the time simply known as Ron. Artest is one of the best perimeter defenders ever, and famously a maniacal competitor. He had lightning-quick hands and an extremely strong build with a 7-foot wingspan, making him a prototypical multi-positional defender built to harass guards and forwards alike. And it was primarily that elite on-ball defense that made him a member of a select club of non-bigs to win Defensive Player of the Year. The Magic's nod easily goes to Dwight Howard. Dwight was the best defender on the planet from about 2009 to 2011, leading 3 straight top 3 defenses in that span, as he became the only player ever to win 3 straight depoys. Dwight was simultaneously the best rim protector and rebounder in the sport, a special athlete with a strong build, 7'5" wingspan, phenomenal timing, and explosive leaping ability that allowed him to cover ground as a helper and erase shots that no one else on the planet could. The Hornets are tough. I have to mention Anthony Mason, who was an extremely versatile defender and elite rebounder at 6'7", 250, and Eddie Jones, 2 underrated studs of the late 90s, but this decision really came down to 2 names for me. First was the defensive chaos agent appropriately nicknamed Crash, Gerald Wallace, a freak athlete whose gas tank never ran out. He was an excellent perimeter defender, deftly navigating screens and harassing ball handlers with his elite hands, and a great help defender, an elite shot blocking wing, and an expert charge taker who was extremely active. Wallace is one of just 3 NBA players ever to average 2 steals and 2 blocks per game in the same season, and he led the Bobcats to the league's #1 defense in 2010. But as is often the case, it's very difficult to deny the impact of an elite interior defender like Alonzo Mourning. Despite being slightly undersized for an elite center at the time at 6'10", Zoe was willing to challenge anybody at the rim and did so to great effect, averaging 3.2 blocks per game in Charlotte. He was strong, but also moved well in his younger years and was a tenacious post defender. And the Hornets' results without him on the floor are very telling. They had a defensive rating of 107.9 in games he played, a slightly above average mark at the time, and a 114.9 defensive rating when he was out, easily the worst number in the league. Charlotte also fell from the number 9 defense in Zoe's final season there to the number 27 defense the year after. More testament to his monstrous impact. The Heat have 3 very strong candidates: Zoe, again, LeBron James, and Bam Adebayo. As I said earlier, Bron peaked defensively in Miami. He was still a freakishly explosive athlete, but was stronger and more intellectually mature than in his Cleveland days. LeBron was an excellent communicator, impactful low man, strong rebounder, and perimeter defender, a famously complete player. Zoe was a dominant defender in Miami, winning back-to-back block titles and depoys, in fact, and improving the Heat's defensive rating from 18th to 6th in his first season there, and he continued to anchor elite defenses throughout his prime. So this was truly a 3-horse race to me, but I'm giving the nod to Bam Adebayo. Bam is the most switchable center in NBA history. His lateral mobility is exceptional, and his ability to seamlessly switch has proven problematic for many offenses over the years, simply negating advantages because he guards so well on the perimeter. He can check elite forwards. Nobody has guarded Giannis better, as Bam has held him to 47% shooting when guarding him over 3 playoff series, and perhaps nobody works harder on the defensive end. Bam is dialed into every action and rotation and grinds on the glass, easily leading the league in box outs this season. Although he does lack high-end rim protection as a 6'9" center with a 7'1" wingspan, ranking about 80th in shots defended at the rim this past season and holding opponents just about 5% below their average. And rim protection is, of course, extremely important for a big. Bam is still solid there and is amazing at everything else. So I slightly prefer him over Zoe due to his versatility, and he's more of a constant defensive force than LeBron, who never consistently played with the unrelenting defensive effort of Bam. For the Hawks, it's Dikembe again, very easily. He improved Atlanta by 11 points per 100 possessions in his time there, an elite number that speaks to his all-time great defensive impact because he wasn't much of an offensive player, and he was more agile in his early Hawks years than he was in Philly. For Washington, we'll give it to Elvin Hayes. He was an excellent rim protector with good hands, averaging 3.5 stocks per game in Washington, and an elite rebounder who moved well. Hayes improved the Bullets' defensive rating by 4 points compared to the previous season when he joined the team, after previously transforming the Rockets from a bottom 3 defense to a top 3 defense as a rookie. Keep in mind, there were just 12 to 14 teams at that time, but still very impressive. I strongly considered Hayes' teammate, Wes Unseld, an insane rebounder, an extremely high-effort defender, and Gus Johnson, a strong, athletic, versatile rebounding machine as a forward, but Hayes' advantage as a rim protector ultimately made him more impactful in my eyes. Portland's honor goes to Bill Walton. Walton was the best defender in the league during his tragically brief prime, leading back-to-back top 5 defenses in 1977 and 78, and earning first-team honors as an elite shot blocker with tremendous length, excellent instincts, and constant activity. He was a true captain of the defense. Walton is often remembered more for his visionary passing as a center, but his defense was the backbone of the dominance that made him league MVP. For the Jazz, it's Rudy Gobert. Mark Eaton is an honorable second, a 2-time depoy and the single-season block record holder who anchored 4 number 1 defenses. Eaton was 7'4" with a 7'6" wingspan, just a monstrous rim protector. However, Gobert is the best rim protector of the last 15 years and a more complete defender. From 2015 to 2022, Gobert's entire run as a starter in Utah, he defended the most shots at the rim and held opposing players to the lowest field goal percentage there, 12% below their average over an 8-season span. He also improved those Utah defenses by an average of 7.5 points per 100 possessions, a mark of consistent transformation on that end that none of his contemporaries can match. And usually, Gobert was carrying lackluster defensive personnel to elite heights. In 2017, for example, the Jazz finished as a top 3 defense, despite ranking as what would be the worst defense in the league when Gobert was off the floor. Also, separating Gobert from Eaton is his elite rebounding, as he averaged 12 boards per game in Utah, and ironically, considering his reputation, his ability to guard in space. Gobert is often mocked for occasionally looking like a baby deer guarding on the perimeter, but Eaton was more like a lumbering giant, and although it was certainly less important that bigs be able to hang on the perimeter at that time, Eaton was exceptionally restricted to the paint. Meanwhile, Gobert actually ranked as better than a 90th percentile isolation defender twice in Utah and was above average there for 5 straight seasons. Of course, he's not the most switchable big, but he's good there. Yet, to this day, the myth lives on that Gobert is some bumbling fool out in space, even as we just watched him take on his supposed nightmare matchup, a Phoenix Suns team with 3 highly skilled perimeter stars, and switch on to all of them with great effectiveness, as their big 3 shot 40% combined when guarded by Gobert. But as we look back on the origins of all this, the most damage to Gobert's defensive reputation was done in Utah's 2021 playoff series against the Clippers, when LA played 5-out small ball and sent the Jazz packing with 20 made threes in Game 6. Particularly, it was Gobert's assignment, Terrence Mann, who got hot from deep. But this was not on Gobert defensively. The Clippers were able to consistently create dribble penetration against Utah's weak perimeter defenders, forcing Gobert to step up and help to take away the rim, but leaving a shooter somewhere open, often Mann, who was the least proven shooter, and the Clippers were an amazing shooting team that was on fire from deep. But Gobert wasn't getting burnt. He has to help. He has to take away those layups. He just can't be everywhere at once. Without Gobert on the floor, Utah's defensive rating was 22 points worse in the Clippers series. Completely catastrophic, because their perimeter defense still sucked and they were missing out on Gobert's rim protection. Where Gobert does deserve blame for this series is, as always, on his offense. His inability to attack mismatches and punish small ball lineups allowed LA to play their most lethal offensive personnel, which would have been untenable against a better offensive center. Similarly, Gobert's poor hands on offense and struggles finishing and making reads as a roller in this past postseason was the issue he presented for Minnesota, not his defense, which was spectacular. This is the infuriating aspect of Gobert discourse. Because people despise watching him as an unskilled offensive player, they feel the need to berate his entire game, but his defense truly is, and always has been, sensational. For the Sonics/Thunder franchise, it's Gary Payton. A borderline psychotic irritant with excellent hands and a 6'8" wingspan, Payton was an on-ball nightmare for offensive players. His non-stop motor allowed him to apply intense ball pressure and ball denial to keep stars uncomfortable, as he most famously did against Michael Jordan in the 1996 finals, holding the otherwise infallible finals performer to under 24 points per game on 37% shooting over the last 3 games, in which he was Jordan's primary defender. He was just about as good as a 6'4" guard can get defensively. And while we're on phenomenal shit talkers, for the Timberwolves, it is of course Kevin Garnett. KG was a one-of-a-kind defensive wonder. A uniquely agile lateral mover at 6'11" with a 7'5" wingspan, with fluid hips, excellent change in direction, and extremely active hands that made him one of the most effective bigs guarding the perimeter ever. Garnett was also a genius team defender, a major disruptor in passing lanes, and good rim protector with an incredible awareness of opponents' plays, tendencies, and weaknesses. And he took motor to another level, bringing constant intensity, communication, and harassment of his matchup. KG was also a rebounding machine, leading the league for 4 straight seasons. This top 5 defensive peak is the leading reason KG is one of the most impactful winning players ever, as among players with at least 500 games played, only Nikola Jokic has a better on-off differential, which measures your team's improvement with you on the court compared to off it, since the stat began in 1997. Speaking of Jokic, we're on to the Nuggets. It sucks to have to do this to Bobby Jones again, who was even better defensively in Denver than Philly, averaging 3.9 stocks per game in his time there. The man was 10 times first team all defense and one of the best ever not to win defensive player of the year. But again, Dikembe says no to old Bobby. Dikembe saved Denver after their hilarious 1991 season, in which they posted one of the worst defenses in NBA history, making them an above-average defense as a rookie. Dikembe's absurd shot blocking was at its apex in Denver, as he averaged 4.2 blocks per game in his final 3 seasons there. He also played one of the best defensive series ever, averaging 6.2 blocks per game in 1994 and stifling the Supersonics' elite offense, holding them 8 points below their regular season offensive rating as the 8th-seeded Nuggets pulled off a historic upset. By the way, he averaged 5.4 blocks per game the next series against the Jazz. He was just a different beast. For the Clippers, it's Kawhi. He may not have been at his peak, but especially at the start of his tenure in LA, he was still a phenomenal wing defender. The competition here is not great, but shout out to defensive specialist Bo Outlaw. For the Warriors, we have to mention Nate Thurmond, one of the greatest post defenders and rebounders of all time, and an extraordinarily jacked individual with extremely long arms. He was also very mobile, but the correct choice is Draymond Green. There has not been a better defender in basketball over the last 15 years than Draymond. Draymond has always been a very good perimeter defender, quick with great hands, and he possesses the strength and physicality to guard in the post at a very high level as well, but his most special trait has always been his help in off-ball defense. Draymond is a genuine free safety, constantly anticipating and blowing up actions and communicating to his teammates. And with a 7'1" wingspan, his interior defense is outstanding for his size. He held opposing players more than 8% below their average field goal percentage at the rim from 2015 to 2023, a number that stacks up against the league's best defensive centers, and he is 6'6" and also an awesome perimeter defender. His combination of versatility and IQ is arguably the greatest we've ever seen, and it's driven him to improve the Warriors' defense by more than 5 points per 100 possessions over 12 years. For the Lakers, we have to mention Michael Cooper, the rare perimeter defender to win DPOY, and Jerry West, one of the best rim-protecting guards ever, who was all defense every healthy season of his career once the honor came into existence. Wilt deserves a shout here, and George Mikan would also make a very strong case, but pre-Russell NBA history is very weird and usually where I draw the line with lists like this, but if he's your choice, that's fine by me. My choice is Anthony Davis. AD is an extraordinarily gifted defender. He's very agile guarding in space, has elite hands, is an outstanding rim protector and rebounder, and ranked as a 96th percentile post defender this season. I'd argue he's the most complete and best defensive big on the planet today. In the 2023 postseason, we saw him destroy the Grizzlies by taking away the rim, averaging over 4 blocks per game, then give the Warriors fits playing a high drop coverage, challenging both Steph and pocket passes to the rollers at the same time. He can play every defensive coverage at a high level at the most important position, and the fact that he doesn't have a DPOY is a travesty. I would have given it to him in 2020. The Kings do not have a rich defensive history. We must shout out the team's all-time blocks and steals leader, Slam and Sam Lacey, and Doug Christie was a phenomenal defensive wing of the early 2000s. But Artest was basically still at his defensive peak in Sacramento, so he gets another spot here. He was just a bit longer than Christie and much stronger, so he could take on a wider range of matchups, and he improved Sacramento's defense by more than 5 points per 100 possessions in his time there, a sizable margin. I really considered giving another repeat nod to Jason Kidd with the Suns, but I think Shawn Marion was a bit more impactful. Marion was an uber-versatile defensive forward, a very good perimeter defender, but a better team defender who averaged an outstanding 3.3 stocks per game in his Suns' career, along with an exceptional 10 rebounds per game at 6'7". In the mid-2000s, it was Marion keeping the Phoenix defense afloat, rotating sharply, cleaning up his teammates' mistakes on the back end, and taking on varied matchups. The moment Phoenix traded him, their defense fell from average to among the league's worst, as their defensive rating was 5 points worse after trading Marion midseason in 08, and they would not field a defense ranked better than 24th in the final 4 years of the Nash era with Marion gone. He is, without a doubt, the best defender to never receive all defense honors since they came to exist, of course. For the Mavs, I'm going with Tyson Chandler. Both Kidd and Marion were vital parts of the team's championship defense in 2011, but it was Chandler anchoring the interior with excellent rim protection, rebounding, and communication, and he was agile enough to effectively challenge perimeter players inside the arc, all of which earned him a third-place DPOY finish in his lone season in Dallas. The Pelicans' GOAT defender is Anthony Davis, who was at his raw athletic peak in New Orleans and was easily the best defensive playmaker in the league there, averaging at least 4 stocks per game in 4 different seasons and improving their defense by more than 7 points per 100 possessions in 2017 and 2018. The Grizzlies are a doozy. For me, this was probably the hardest call on the list. We have to shout out Tony Allen, an amazing one-on-one perimeter defender, but his size limits his impact as a helper and rebounder. Marc Gasol, famously and controversially the 2013 DPOY, was a damn good defender. He was a genius in terms of his positioning and instincts, always in the right place, while he had a 7'4" wingspan, excellent hands, and was very strong. This made him a very good defensive anchor, even as a limited athlete who was just a solid rim protector and below average as a rebounder, but those limitations do keep him from being as transformative as most other bigs we've discussed. Jaren Jackson Jr. makes a great case because his 2023 DPOY season was incredible. He blocked over 3 shots per game and held opposing players 13% below their average field goal percentage at the rim. His interior defense roaming at the 4 spot was incredible. I do have some issues with Jackson's defense though. He's an atrocious rebounding big, grabbing just 5.5 per game in 32 minutes per game this past season, and he was a much less effective defensive anchor at center overall without another rim protector, primary post defender, and elite rebounding big like Steven Adams alongside him. He's still too foul prone and has been prone to chasing blocks, so I trust his defensive decision making much less than the alternatives. He makes more mistakes. I do believe we'll see him bounce back once he plays more power forward again, and I totally get if he's your choice, but there is a different level of faith I have in my choice, Shane Battier. Battier was an excellent man defender, a good athlete at 6'8" who excelled on the perimeter, but could also battle with bigger forwards in the post, and an extremely smart defender both on and off ball. This made Battier a phenomenal team defender with excellent positioning and the willingness to always leave his body on the line. Plus, he was a very effective low man and secondary rim protector, averaging 1.4 blocks per game in 06. Battier achieved a rare level of defensive impact for a wing, improving the Grizzlies' defense by 6 points per 100 possessions over his final 2 seasons there. Even more remarkably, Memphis ranked 2nd in defensive rating in Battier's final season and plummeted to dead last the year after he left. Battier actually started to get a little more attention when he went to the Rockets, racking up 3 straight top 5 DPOY finishes, and he led 5 straight top 5 defenses across Memphis and Houston. If I had to start a defense with any of those Grizzlies defenders, I'd choose Battier. He'll excel in any environment, do a bunch of things at a high level, play hard, and play smart. Given that both bigs, while very good, have clear limitations, I'm going to give the nod to one of the more underappreciated wings we've seen. The Spurs have some great candidates, the best selection of any team. Pete Kawhi was an unmatched force on the perimeter at the time, and David Robinson anchored multiple #1 defenses and put up stock numbers only Akeem surpasses. Both Kawhi and Robinson are very arguably top 10 defenders ever, and Wemby is on that trajectory. But my choice is Tim Duncan. Duncan led 14 top 3 defenses in San Antonio, including 11 straight to start his career, marking a sustained run of dominant defense surpassed only by Russell's Celtics. Duncan was probably the most perfectly sound help defender of the modern era. His timing and positioning were perfect, his discipline was outstanding, and he was an elite shot blocker and monstrous rebounder with underrated agility at his athletic peak. He was an excellent post defender who dominated at both power forward and center, and in his rookie season, which also saw Robinson return after missing almost the entire season due to injury, they turned the league's worst defense into its second best. And you could argue Robinson deserves this spot, but while he was the more freakish athlete, I'd argue Duncan was the more perfect defender. And although we're focused on peak here, I do have to mention that Duncan's defensive longevity is the best ever. Even in his late 30s, he ranked among the best rim protectors and defensive anchors in basketball, which makes him a top 3 defender ever to me. And for the Rockets, it's of course Akeem Olajuwon, the best defender since Russell. Akeem had the best hands of any big man ever, remarkably ranking top 10 all-time in steals, and was disruptive on entry passes and basically any time the ball was exposed. He had the agility to cover ground and recover quickly, the strength to battle with the league's most powerful bigs in the post, and was the best shot blocker in modern history with a 7'6" wingspan. The reason I believe Russell is the GOAT over him is largely because Russell played in an era when a single big could have a more monstrous defensive impact because everybody wanted to score at the rim, and that defense could be the driving force for an unstoppable dynasty, as it was. Akeem led 1 number 1 defense. Russell led 12. Nothing like that will ever be replicated. But after Russell, it's Akeem. So there you have it, the best defender in history for every NBA team. I hope you guys enjoyed this one because I would love to do more videos like this, breaking down each team's GOAT in different areas, but these suckers take a ton of work, so if you enjoyed the video and want to see more like it, please subscribe if you haven't already, or else I'm sending 2015 Kawhi to guard you in front of all your family and friends, and that's just going to suck for everybody involved.